On a quiet afternoon at a roadside diner where the smell of coffee mingled with soft country music, the scene suddenly turned into a battlefield of dignity. What could cause a waitress to lose her job simply for standing up for a stranger? And why, just 2 hours later, did a fleet of mysterious black SUVs arrive, carrying the man whose presence silenced the entire room? This isn't just a story about a veteran being mocked. It's about quiet courage, about those who choose to stand when the world remains seated. Join Veteran Best Stories as we uncover the moment when one small act changed everything. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story that stirs the soul. The answer lies ahead. Are you ready? The Rusty Spoon Diner sat quietly along Route 66, where the late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows and gently spilled across the worn wooden tables. The whole place carried a peaceful stillness, as if time itself moved slower here, separated from the noise of the outside world. Emma, the 28-year-old waitress, was the heartbeat of this rhythm. With a warm smile on her lips and sharp eyes that missed nothing, she observed everything around her. Every glance, every gesture, as if she had long since understood the language of silence. Her pale blue uniform was faded at the shoulders, a quiet testament to the years she had spent serving here. In her front pocket, her notepad overflowed with hurried scribbles, orders, special requests, and even the quiet confessions shared by regulars over coffee. Yet Emma never once complained about the work. The little diner had its own rhythm, with regulars who didn't need menus. They ordered by habit, as if the food had become part of their very identity. The clinking of silverware, the low hum of the ceiling fan, and the warmth of the space all blended into something deeply familiar. Emma, though never expecting more than an ordinary day, always welcomed each moment with the quiet patience of someone long accustomed to the hush of the evening shift. But today, everything changed. The door chimed its familiar ding, and in walked a man, carrying with him a gust of something unfamiliar. His name was Jack, over 70, with the bearing of a man who had lived through war, carrying memories too deep to fade. His face, worn by time, still held a quiet strength. A weathered army jacket, boots worn to the sole, and a slow, deliberate walk, as though he carried a lifetime of war in every step. Jack scanned the room carefully, not out of fear, but instinct, a habit born of surviving days when no one dared meet his eyes. Under that gaze, the diner seemed foreign again, thick with old memories. He chose a corner table where the light was softest and sat. His hands, slightly trembling, rested on the table, each heartbeat carrying echoes of things never truly left behind. Emma approached quietly, pen hovering over her notepad. Her eyes lit up slightly as she looked at him, but her voice remained calm. "Coffee, sir?" she asked gently. Jack nodded, requesting well-done eggs, dry toast, and black coffee. Simple food, but for him, rich with the memory of days gone by. When she brought the order, he smiled, not with words, but with a soft, grateful glance. Emma knew that for men like Jack, thank yous were rare, not because they lacked gratitude, but because some things were too sacred for words. What mattered wasn't a phrase, but the respect and understanding he felt from those around him. But not everyone saw him the way Emma did. 2 tables away, a man in a slick suit, hair perfectly slicked back, sat alone, sipping wine. He looked at Jack with mockery in his eyes, then scoffed. "Look at that!" Old man pulled out his piggy bank, he said loudly enough for the whole diner to hear. His words hit the air like a punch, freezing the room for a beat. Emma stopped in her tracks. Her heart pounded. She knew this moment would change everything. Her eyes shifted from Jack to the man in the suit. She'd grown used to rude comments and condescending glances, but this time, it struck her differently. There was a strange sorrow in it, a deep pain she couldn't quite name. She felt conflicted, hurt, yet steady in her resolve. She couldn't let it slide. This diner, her diner, had always welcomed everyone, no matter who they were or where they came from. But today, that respect had been challenged, and Emma wouldn't let that go unanswered. Emma stepped out of the Rusty Spoon diner. The door creaked softly before closing behind her. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the pavement, bright yet heavy, as if the world around her was bracing for a coming storm. She didn't rush home, nor did she reach out to friends to share what had just happened. Instead, she walked slowly down Main Street, clutching her neatly folded apron in one hand. Her name tag was still pinned to her chest, a quiet reminder of all she had just endured. With every step, Carl's words echoed in her mind. Too emotional for this job. The phrase landed like a slap, tightening her chest. Compassion and human dignity. Were they things she had to abandon just to hold on to a paycheck? The thought clawed at her, a raw sense of injustice burning deeper with every breath. It was as if the very values she had always honored were now being treated as flaws. She kept walking in silence, passing familiar streets and quiet houses. Eventually, she stopped in front of the old war memorial, where names etched into weathered stone had long been softened by time and neglect. She sat on the cold bench nearby, hands still clutching her apron, head bowed, eyes fixed on those names. She wondered, who had ever stood up for them? Those who had fought and died in silence, without fanfare, without parades. Who, among the survivors, had ever stepped forward when the world turned its back? The questions swirled in her mind, leaving her with a hollow ache. Her compassion for Jack, for people like him, suddenly felt out of place in a world that seemed to no longer recognize its worth. While Emma sat, lost in thought among names carved in stone, the Rusty Spoon returned to its usual rhythm. Forks scraped against plates, ice clinked in glasses, chairs slid back and forth, sounds trying to restore a sense of normalcy. Yet the corner booth where Jack had sat still held a quiet weight. No matter how loud the chatter or cheerful the smiles, the tension of that moment lingered like a shadow. Jack sat there, in a quiet corner of the Rusty Spoon diner, slowly counting coins, one by one. His hands, hardened by time and labor, moved with care and certainty, as if each coin held a story too vast to be told aloud. The soft light from the ceiling fan fell gently across his weathered skin, casting a glow that seemed to reflect memories long faded. He kept counting, again and again, and though the coins were small and few, to him they carried a weight far greater than their value. Memories from a past that could never truly be measured in dollars. Just a few tables away, the man in the gleaming suit, self-declared king of the room, kept eyeing Jack with open mockery. He sipped his wine, then laughed aloud. The sound broke through the usual quiet of the diner like a crack in glass. "Need me to open my wallet for you, old man?" he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. A few chuckles rose from nearby tables, accomplices in the moment. But not Emma. She had heard comments like that before, but today she couldn't look away. Emma turned toward him, not in anger, not with haste, but with calm, unwavering resolve. Her gaze was sharp, steady. She walked toward Jack, unhurried. When she reached his table, she gently placed two $1 bills down beside his hand. Her fingers touched the surface lightly, and she spoke, her voice clear, firm, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "He's already paid. More than enough." Her words were soft, but they landed like thunder, slicing through the noise, silencing every whisper. They didn't echo shame, they delivered truth. The man in the suit looked up, caught off guard. His lips moved like he wanted to argue, but Emma's eyes, steady and fierce, left him speechless. The room fell into complete silence. Jack, still seated, said nothing, but his eyes, weathered by war and time, held something unspoken, like Emma had just returned something to him that had been lost long ago. It wasn't gratitude. It was recognition. He nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough. A silent connection. Nothing more needed saying, but the moment didn't last. From behind the counter, Carl, the manager, watched with arms crossed and a face carved in stone. He stepped forward. His voice was cold and sharp. "Emma, come here." Her heart pounded. She knew something was coming. Without a word, she walked to him. His stare was ice. He didn't need to say much. He handed her a folded paper, just one line written inside: termination of employment. No explanation, no warning. That was it. Emma didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply unfastened her apron, folded it neatly, placed it on the counter, and turned to leave. She didn't rush. She didn't look back at Carl or anyone else. But just before she reached the door, she turned once more to look at Jack. He was still sitting there, beside his now cold coffee, his eyes carrying the weight of a battlefield, filled with wounds and memories that never truly healed. She gave a soft nod. He returned it. That was all. A quiet affirmation. No words, just understanding. As she stepped outside, Emma felt a small weight lift from her chest. No regret. No sorrow. Just a hollow silence filling the space where something used to be. But her story, and Jack's story, wasn't over. This was only one chapter in a longer journey they were still walking through. If you felt the weight of that moment, hit subscribe on Veteran Best Stories and help us honor people like Emma and Jack, those who live quietly, but carry within them a strength few will ever truly understand. Emma stepped out of the Rusty Spoon diner. The door creaked softly before closing behind her. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the pavement, bright yet heavy, as if the world around her was bracing for a coming storm. She didn't rush home, nor did she reach out to friends to share what had just happened. Instead, she walked slowly down Main Street, clutching her neatly folded apron in one hand. Her name tag was still pinned to her chest, a quiet reminder of all she had just endured. With every step, Carl's words echoed in her mind. Too emotional for this job. The phrase landed like a slap, tightening her chest. Compassion and human dignity. Were they things she had to abandon just to hold on to a paycheck? The thought clawed at her, a raw sense of injustice burning deeper with every breath. It was as if the very values she had always honored were now being treated as flaws. She kept walking in silence, passing familiar streets and quiet houses. Eventually, she stopped in front of the old war memorial, where names etched into weathered stone had long been softened by time and neglect. She sat on the cold bench nearby, hands still clutching her apron, head bowed, eyes fixed on those names. She wondered, who had ever stood up for them?
those who had fought and died in silence, without fanfare, without parades. Who among the survivors had ever stepped forward when the world turned its back? The questions swirled in her mind, leaving her with a hollow ache. Her compassion for Jack, for people like him, suddenly felt out of place in a world that seemed to no longer recognize its worth. While Emma sat, lost in thought among names carved in stone, the rusty spoon returned to its usual rhythm. Forks scraped against plates, ice clinked in glasses, chairs slid back and forth, sounds trying to restore a sense of normalcy. Yet the corner booth where Jack had sat still held a quiet weight. No matter how loud the chatter or cheerful the smiles, the tension of that moment lingered like a shadow. Lily, the waitress covering the next shift, approached Jack's table. She poured his coffee without meeting his eyes, carefully placing the bill face down on the table, an unspoken apology she couldn't voice aloud. A thick silence filled the space between them. No matter how much she tried to act as if nothing had happened, she couldn't escape the chill of Jack's quiet stare. The bill sat half-hidden beneath the plate, untouched. Jack's gaze instead rested on the two $1 bills Emma had left, still sitting there, unmoved. This story wasn't over. Not with Emma's goodbye. Not yet. Something deeper was still unfolding. Jack rose from his seat. His hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from something stronger. The steadiness of a soldier long familiar with drawn-out battles. A man who never truly left the field, no matter how much it changed. His steps were slow, deliberate, each one firm, as if he were walking into yet another fight. His eyes held no anger, no sorrow, only a quiet resolve, the kind that doesn't need to be explained. He stepped outside, never once glancing back, not at the diner, not at the people who had mocked him. None of it mattered anymore. The laughter, the whispers, they couldn't touch him. He had one focus: to keep moving forward. Whatever life had left to throw his way, he would face it. He hadn't been wrong to walk out, and deep down he knew, sometimes, living meant simply continuing on, even when no one truly understands the wars you've already fought. And so, the story of Jack and of Emma goes on. The names carved into stone, the ones who once fought and sacrificed, must never be forgotten. And neither should people like Emma and Jack, those who may never be honored, yet remain heroes in quiet, powerful stories that matter more than the world will ever know. The rusty spoon, as always, lay in the quiet of a late afternoon. But today, something wasn't right. A strange tension still lingered in the air, thick, unspoken, as if the diner itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Every eye remained on Jack, the veteran who had walked in that morning. No apologies, no greetings, just silence wrapped around him like armor. Every word of mockery from the man in the shiny suit only deepened the weight in the room. At first, no one truly realized what was unfolding, but there was one person, an outsider, who saw everything. Tommy, the delivery driver running late for his shift, walked into the diner just as the tension still hung like smoke. Tommy wasn't anyone special. No medals, no titles, just a truck driver doing his job, living a simple life. But 10 years ago, he had served on a military base where the name Colonel was spoken with respect. The Colonel was a man of few words. When he entered a room, everyone stood tall. Tommy never forgot those days, how the Colonel would simply stand there, with eyes sharp as steel and a posture that told the truth before any word did. He didn't need to speak. Everyone just knew. Men like him never backed down. And as Tommy looked at Jack, he saw the Colonel again. Not in face, but in posture.
in that quiet strength that filled the space without needing permission. Just like the Colonel, Jack didn't need to raise his voice. His very presence commanded attention. Every movement, every breath, carried a dignity that couldn't be explained, only felt. Tommy stood quietly, listening as Lily whispered about Emma, about Jack, about the man in the suit and his cruel words. He heard the things unspoken, the truths the diner tried to bury. And then, as if he couldn't bear it any longer, Tommy stepped out, climbed into his truck, and sat in the stillness of the cab. His hands clutched the steering wheel. His eyes locked on the empty road ahead. The engine was silent, and only his breath filled the space. That feeling, that deep, unsettled knowing that something unjust had happened, kept him from driving away. He picked up his phone, and for the first time in 5 years, something pushed him to make a call he had long avoided. He dialed a number, one that had sat in his contacts, untouched. It rang twice. Then a low, commanding voice answered, "Speak." Just one word, but it hit Tommy's chest like a strike. He didn't hesitate, no detours, no stalling. What needed to be said would be said. This time he wasn't wasting a single breath. "Sir," Tommy began, his voice heavy and steady, "someone just got fired for defending a veteran." He paused, then added, "And that veteran, he looks like someone you once knew." There was silence. Tommy could feel the weight of it on the other end. Then finally, a single clipped response. "Where?" Tommy gave the address without hesitation. The line went dead after that. No goodbyes, no promises, just silence. But Tommy sat there, feeling a strange calm wash over him. He had done the right thing. He didn't know what would come next, but something would. Miles away, in a windowless office, a man with a silver star pinned to his jacket rose to his feet. The light from the window barely touched his face, but something in him had shifted. The room hadn't changed, but the air around him had. He knew, this time, it would be different. Tommy's call wasn't just a phone call. It was the beginning of something. A chain of events even he couldn't have predicted. And if you're feeling the tension, the strange gravity of this moment, don't forget to hit subscribe to Veteran Best Stories as we follow the lives of people like Tommy, Jack, and Emma. The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the true heroes among us. 2 hours later, the Rusty Spoon returned to its usual late afternoon quiet. The small diner hadn't changed. Same worn wooden tables, same chairs that creaked every time someone sat down. The regulars kept ordering more pie, chatting as they always did, and Carl, behind the counter, continued taking inventory, pretending everything was normal, as if nothing had changed since that morning. But beneath the calm, there was a tension in the air, thick, unspoken, like something was about to happen, and no one dared to name it. Then, a low engine hum echoed from the parking lot. At first, no one noticed, but when 2 sleek black SUVs glided past the window, windows dark, no decals, no markings, just cold metal reflecting the dull light of dusk, heads slowly turned. They pulled to a stop in silence, and then the diner's bell jingled sharply as the door swung open, breaking the hush. A man stepped inside. He wore no medals, no name tag, just a well-fitted coat and the bearing of someone who had not grown tired with age. His eyes swept across the room, cold, sharp, the gaze of a commander surveying a battlefield. The entire diner fell silent. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence, like someone had issued a command without saying a word. Only stillness remained. Carl straightened behind the counter, color draining from his face. The fake smile he wore cracked and faded as the man's eyes locked onto his. No words were spoken, no gestures made. Yet the weight of the man's presence gripped the room like a vice. He approached the counter and, without a word, placed a plain white envelope onto it. Simple, but heavy, like a verdict that could not be escaped. Carl stared at the envelope but didn't dare touch it. Every eye in the room was fixed on him and on it, waiting, breath held. The man turned to glance toward the corner booth where Jack had sat. Then he turned back without a word, walked to the door, and stepped back into the waiting SUV. The engine growled, low, commanding, and in moments, the black vehicles slipped away into the fading daylight, leaving behind only a rising cloud of dust. No one spoke. No one moved. Not even when the sound of engines faded completely. The diner sat in a heavy silence, as if the air had thickened, pressing inward. The white envelope remained on the counter like a live wire, unopened, untouched. People glanced at one another, wide-eyed, exchanging looks filled with unease and curiosity, but not a single voice dared break the quiet. Carl stood there for what felt like ages. His hand trembled. He didn't want to touch it, didn't want to open it, but he knew he couldn't avoid it. Slowly, he picked up the envelope and opened it with shaking fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a few short lines, but each word hit like a blade. "You fired the one who did right." She stood up. "I came." No signature. Just a few initials scrawled beneath it, and one final line, bold and clear. "Don't make me come back." Carl's eyes widened in panic. His hand trembled more visibly as he reread the message. The walls of the diner, the tables, the chairs, they all seemed to bear down on him now, as if the building itself was watching, judging. This wasn't just a note. It was judgment on a failure, on a decision made without honor. The room remained frozen. No one spoke. No one dared break the spell. Carl stood alone, the paper still in his hand, heart racing, mind spiraling. The room full of patrons, all unaware of the full story, felt the weight shift in the air. They didn't understand everything, but they knew one thing for sure. Nothing in this diner would ever be the same again. The rusty spoon, once a quiet haven untouched by time, now stood at a crossroads no one had seen coming, and in the silence that followed, everyone understood. Something had changed forever. The next morning, Emma woke up like she always did, her steps automatic, lost in routine. She brewed her coffee without thinking. Every motion was muscle memory, woven into her daily life. The rich aroma filled the air, but in her heart, everything felt distant, as if the world outside was drifting past without meaning. Emma had no intention of returning to the rusty spoon, not to face Carl, not to face the corner booth that now held a moment she'd never forget. But just as she sat down with her coffee, the phone rang. It was Lily, her voice shaky and filled with worry. "You need to come. Now!" Emma didn't ask questions. She simply placed her cup on the table, stood, and put on her coat. There was no hesitation. She knew she had to go. And so, she left her house without a word, walking into the morning with the quiet of someone long used to making decisions in silence. When she pushed open the door of the diner, the familiar bell chimed, but today it rang through a thick tension in the air. Every eye in the room turned to her, as if the entire diner had been waiting for her. There were no greetings, no light-hearted laughter. Carl stood behind the counter, his gaze lowered as though he was bracing for something. Emma didn't seek attention, but today, no one could look away. She walked in slowly, didn't glance at anyone, just made her way to the counter. There it was, her apron, neatly folded, name tag still gleaming beneath the diner's lights. She stepped forward, picked it up, and without a word, tied it back around her waist, as if yesterday had only been a pause, not an end. She poured coffee, smiled gently at a regular seated nearby, and in that silence, the entire room seemed to exhale, like something had been repaired, like peace had returned. The corner booth where Jack once sat was still empty, but it no longer felt cold. The diner resumed its rhythm, but deep down, everyone knew nothing would ever truly be the same. A day later, he returned. But it wasn't Jack. The man who stepped through the door wore a faded military jacket, his sharp eyes scanning the room. Emma recognized him immediately. He wasn't a stranger. She approached with a cup of coffee. No greetings, no questions, none were needed. He nodded once, a simple gesture, but filled with meaning. When he stood to leave, he placed something on the table, a weathered military patch. No explanation, no speech, just the patch, left behind like a silent message that only those who fought would understand. That patch, small as it was, became something far greater. From that day on, the corner booth was no longer just a place to sit. It became sacred ground, a quiet altar for those who had fought, those who had stood, those who never bowed. No one dared sit there. No one dared clear it, not out of rules, but out of reverence, out of respect for those who gave more than anyone ever asked of them. Rusty Spoon was no longer just a diner. It had become a place of meaning, where dignity prevailed. Every corner, every chair held stories, stories of quiet triumphs, of battles fought without fanfare. Here, the forgotten were remembered. The unseen were honored. The warriors who never asked for recognition finally had a place to call home. And to you, our amazing viewers of Veteran Best Stories, get ready. What comes next will stir your soul. The story of Emma, Jack, and the corner booth is only the beginning of the quiet courage we're here to celebrate. Before you settle in with your next cup of coffee or the evening sun, hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you feel something when you hear stories like this. Especially if you're watching from the US, from small towns like the Rusty Spoon, or from the bright lights of big cities. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Maybe you're in Texas at 7 p.m. or New York at midnight. We cherish every connection. Share your story or the name of someone you know who stood up for what's right. Together, let's keep the fire of dignity burning. Don't miss out. Veteran Best Stories will be back with moments you won't be able to look away from.